Femininity by Susan Brownmiller. Epilogue. My aim is not to propose a new definition of femininity, one that better suits the coming decade, or one that lays claim to moral or physical superiority as some sort of intrinsic female province, but to invite examination of a compelling aesthetic that evolved over thousands of years, to explore its origins and the reasons for its perseverance in the effort to illuminate the restrictions on free choice. Historically, as I have attempted to show, the fear of not being feminine enough, in style or in spirit, has been used as a sledgehammer against the collective and individual aspirations of women, since failure in femininity carries the charge of mannish or neutered, making biological gender subject to ongoing proof. The great paradox of femininity, as I see it, is that a judicious concession here and there has been known to work wonders as protective coloration in a man's world and as a means of survival, but total surrender has stopped women point blank from major forms of achievement. However femininity is used, and if one fact should be clear, it is that femininity is used. All approaches toward what men have defined as proper masculine pursuits are set up with roadblocks and detours that say, quote unquote, for femininity, turn here, or, quote unquote, for femininity, turn back. And the lonesome traveler who wishes to ignore the signs still proceeds at her own risk. During femininity's own cautious movement through centuries of social upheaval, at least three nostalgic objectives: woman as symbolic aristocrat, woman as humble servant, and woman as glamorous plaything, became melded into a petrified composite that understandably shows its strains. In whatever terms the divisions are cast, the lady and the whore, the provocative and the chaste, noble altruistic nurturance and childlike dependency, the embedded contradictions leave every woman uncertain. Has she correctly followed all the instructions? Additionally, the conflicts that are rife in ladylike refinement, a submissive demeanor, and dazzling allure guarantee that women will be divided amongst themselves, suspicious of other women, as they seek to master an impossible formula to win the approval of men. There is no denying that femininity's dependence on established traditions, be they styles of dress or codes of behavior, offers a psychological grip on one's sexual identity, particularly for those whose dimorphic characteristics fall within the statistical overlap that is biologically normal, yet far from the cultural ideal. This holds true for masculinity as well. An androgynous appearance may be fine for a person of androgynous persuasion. It is not so fine and can be devastating when androgyny is not the intention. What happens next is that certain arbitrary cues and symbols, a hairstyle, an inflection, an attitude toward work, become the social determinants of gender, and they in turn act as conservators of outworn social values and as levers against social change. In the great cultural need to differentiate one sex from the other with absolute clarity, there are burdens of proof on each side of the aisle. But while the extremes of masculinity can harm others, rape, wife beating, street crime, warfare, and a related inability to concede or admit defeat, the extremes of femininity are harmful only to women themselves, in the form of a self-imposed masochism, restraint, inhibition, self-denial, a wasteful use of thought and time, that is deliberately mistaken for quote-unquote true nature. Most hurtfully, perhaps, femininity is not something that improves with age, for girlishness, with its innocent modesty, is unthreatening. Its unthreatening impudence and its promise of ripe sexuality in the best rosy future typifies the feminine principle at its ephemeral best. Women who rely on a feminine strategy as their chief means of survival can do little to stop the roaring tide of maturity as they watch their advantage slip by. No doubt a sociobiologist would argue that this female misfortune is, after all, the way things are supposed to be, for the cultural clock merely reflects the biological clock and ticks off the years of reproductive readiness that are finite in number. This will not do. Gender does ultimately rest on how the species reproduces, but while femaleness will continue to be defined by the XX chromosomal count and its reproductive potential, many women have ceased to define themselves by their reproductive role. Men have never constrained Men were never constrained, anatomically or philosophically, to see themselves primarily as fathers, for reproductive biology is not demanding of the time and energies and consequently the commitment of males. Earning a living, however much the neo Darwinians would like to frame it as a male against male competition and survival of the fittest, has become something other than that. Increasingly, it is a necessity for both of the sexes, with parenthood fitted in optionally as a gratifying interest, not as a service to the species or moral duty, or perpetuation of one's genes. The post reproductive years grow longer and longer, putting into perspective an emerging truth. The problem is not that some women are feminine failures, but that femininity fails as a reliable goal. So much for theory. Women still remain emotionally and financially needy, and understandably, they will grasp at strategies that seem to have worked in the past and that appear to be working for some right now. Even as they reintroduce themselves to the higher heel, the shorter skirt, the thinner brow, the longer lash, and the step back with that inimitable feminine self conscious absorption to admire the effect and scrutinize for imperfection, they are thankful they need not put up with the full armature of deceits and handicaps of earlier generations. For things to improve and progress is made, sorry, for things do improve and progress is made, and they are, in their awareness, if not yet in their freedom to choose, a little closer to being themselves. Acknowledgments. Collecting research material for its project in its early stages took a special intelligence and a pioneer spirit. I would like to thank Barbara Maroff for tracking through the scientific journals and for her keen professional interest in primate studies. Those who volunteered to read drafts of chapters, Myra Terry, Diana Russell, Jane Alpert, Susan Jacoby, Marilyn Caskell, Barbara Milbauer, and Anne Jones, will see that their insights and observations are reflected in the final copy. I am grateful to Sharon Frost, who took on the role of chief advisor in matters of art and aesthetic, and to Leslie Linewand, who offered a crash course in genetics and molecular biology. Doris O'Donnell, Diane Burden, Helen Payne, Marta Vivas, Lillian Lent, Joe Whitlow, Mindy Bickman, Andrea Dworkin, Alice Strauss, Lilia Melanie, Ruby Rorlick, Andrea Egan, Mary Cantwell, Charles Mee, and Eden Lipson passed along books and articles and suggested fresh avenues of inquiry. Discussions with Holly Forsman, Lynn Shapiro, Merle Rubine, Arthur Rubine, Maggie Smith, Florence Rush, Rosh Flegel, Allison Owings, David Gurin, Dan Stewart, Susan Brody, Nancy Milford, Lois Gould, Paulo Wiedger, Wendy Wheel, Claudio Ugalde, Dawn Conte, Lynn Campbell, Dorchen Leadholt, Rosetta Ritz, and Carol Rinsler turned into paragraphs which I know they will recognize. The in-house editing of Paul Johnson, who never said that he minded when I interrupted his own writing labors, smoothed many a sentence and clarified many ideas. Once again, I am indebted to the New York Public Library for the privilege of stashing my typewriter in the Frederick Lewis Allen room while I roamed its divisions. The Mid-Manhattan branch of the New York Public Library, the New York Academy of Medicine Library, and the Fashion Institute of Technology Library, with its open shelves and knowledgeable personnel, were indispensable storehouses of enlightenment and information. The formal interviews I conducted were exceedingly valuable. I would like to thank William G. Hamilton, MD, Orthopedics and Dance, Richard M. Bachrach, D.O., Osteopathy and Movement. Ronald G. Lewandowski, M.D., Plastic Surgery. Peter M. Pressman, M.D., Oncology and Breast Surgery. Norman Orenreich, M.D., Dermatology. Marcia Stork, M.D., and Shelby Colton, M.D., Gynecology. And Ronnie Kolotkin, Electrolysis, for their cooperation, their expertise, and their candor. For the second time, I have had the good fortune to work with that energizing corporate entity known as Simon & Schuster. Marjorie Williams of the Linden Press applied her elegant sensibilities to the manuscript pages. Jerry Sachs, Carol Wilson, and Fran Ross made some graceful catches. Joni Evans, as editor, was a sustaining force that from inception to publication. Her unflagging determination produced a better book.